Welcome to the smartest people in the room. We are glad you are here, and just by showing up, you are already demonstrating your very own smarts. Today, I am pleased to present two amazingly accomplished execs who, between them, have held senior executive roles with most of the largest, most important companies throughout the entire industry. Labels, touring, ticketing, rights management, you name it. These guys have done it, and they've got the concert t-shirts to prove it. In short, they are among the smartest and most broadly experienced people I know. And I promise you will leave here today smarter and more enlightened than you arrived. Before we get started, please let me take care of some business. First, to the audience, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat window. The reason we do these webinars is twofold. First, we want to showcase really smart people and the amazing work they do day to day in the music industry. The second reason is a bit more nuanced. Many of you know that I am a music industry headhunter. I run the music practice at Turnkey ZRG, and I place music executives in roles throughout the industry. So by definition and function, I help people connect with companies. In this series, my goal is to help you make more connections, and I invite you to take full advantage of that opportunity. Specifically, I invite you to engage with the speakers and the other attendees in the chat of the Zoom. Please introduce yourselves, share your LinkedIn profile, say hello to your friends, and make some new ones. And ask questions of our speakers. We will try to address as many of those questions as possible during the interview. Also, this is very important. Please make sure your chat is set to address everyone, not just the host and speakers. I want to thank our program sponsors, for without their support, we could not keep this thing free. Special thanks to MedJet, Turnkey ZRG, the Tennessee Entertainment Commission, Tennessee Brew Works, and Better Than Booze. So let's get down to business. In today's host seat, we welcome back my old friend and alumnus of our platform, Lawrence Peryer. LP, as he's known, is a lifelong music fan turned industry innovator. He has spent his entire career helping artists and organizations forge meaningful connections with their audiences. From pioneering early digital communities to producing Grammy-nominated box sets and award-winning retail experiences, his work lives at the intersection of creativity, technology, and fandom. Equally at home in music tech startups and stalwarts like Live Nation, Warner Music, Amazon, LP, with and on behalf of cultural icons, including David Bowie and Keith Richards, to create groundbreaking projects that push boundaries while staying true to artistic vision. Along the way, he's produced films, launched platforms, written extensively about music and culture, and helped reimagine how artists and fans connect in our ever-evolving digital world. Today, as a sought-after advisor and voice of the future of entertainment and fan experiences, LP speaks at major industry conferences and contributes insights to media outlets the world over. When not working on one of his own creative projects, like co-publishing the online magazine called The Tone Arm or hosting his weekly podcast called Spotlight On, he works with select clients and individuals and civic groups, bringing his passion for innovation and connection to do work that matters. It is such a pleasure to have you back here, LP. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Tom. It's great to be here. Thank you for making this platform and sharing it.
Amen. And joining LP is John Raso. John is CEO of Audium, the digital music royalty collection agency. For over 10 years, Audium has been administering the publishing and sound recording rights for music streaming platforms for the world's best music publishers, writers, and hitmakers. Audium leverages decades of music publishing experiences and innovative technology to locate, claim, and collect their clients' royalties globally with a focus on metadata management. Audium is part of CSAC's Music Services Division. Prior to Audium, John spent 12 years with the Harry Fox Agency as the head of client services, managing the team, providing support to thousands of leading publishers and digital music providers. He directed the implementation of HFA's licensing administrative services for online music and music video services, lyrics, tablature, and royalty settlements. John also spent over 15 years in the record label marketing, publicity, and product management at Atlantic, SST Records, MCA, Roadrunner, and Live Nation Artists. He also hosts a weekly radio show on Radio Free Brooklyn. It is my pleasure to welcome these two rock stars to our platform today. Take it away, guys.
Thanks, Tom.
Tom, you've really built an institution here over the last several years, and as someone who belongs in an institution, I'm grateful to be here again. Um, this is like the latest installment of our almost 30-year ongoing dialogue, and I think we should pick up somewhere that we probably left off in one of our recent conversations, which is I wonder if I could read to you the list of this year's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame nominees,
Oh, yeah. Okay.
and you could give me a yes or no.
Okay. Pretty good this year, but go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. If you have to abstain for any personal or professional reasons, I think our audience will
Okay.
understand. Um, Bad Company.
Yes.
Nice. The Black Crowes.
Too soon.
Okay. I'm no. Mariah Carey.
This comes to the rock and roll definition. So I'm going to go no, but because she's a pop star.
Okay. I'm going to go yes because of her accomplishments, and I've given up on defining it as rock and roll, but I
Yeah.
understand your position. Chubby
Separate argument.
Checker.
Yeah. Definitely. Overdue.
Definitely. Overdue. Joe Cocker.
I was surprised he wasn't in when I saw that he was nominated.
Yeah, you
So,
mentioned him about a month ago to me, and that was surprising for me too.
yeah.
Billy
I didn't
Idol.
know anything. Generation X should have gotten in before Billy Idol solo, but there's Buzzcocks before them. There's like so many bands pre Billy Idol that deserve to be in before. There's no Sex Pistols. Oh, well, I guess they are, right?
I'm
But
no.
yeah. Yeah, it's I think I'm going to a no. I'm over explaining, but no, where's so many bands.
Joy Division / New Order, and I love that it's grouped that way.
Yeah, that's a yes. That would be in my other group of like, where's the class of 78,
Yeah, it's a hard yes. It's a hard
Yeah.
yes. Cyndi Lauper.
I was surprised she was nominated. Like her, don't, but life, let's put it this way, her accomplishments after I find far more impressive than her actual pop music career.
I give her the Special Innovators Award. That's what I would give her. I think she's an important figure.
Let She predates Madonna, right? Like just a little.
They
Right
were
around.
they were when they first came out, there was a lot of controversy in the press of trying to pit them against each other.
Yeah, so I okay, I'll agree with you on that aspect. Yes, I remember
We
the
create a
impact
new
was right
category
there.
for Cyndi
Yeah,
Lauper.
yeah, yeah.
And in fact, I might put Billy Idol in that category. I think what he did was actually important, but not Rock and Roll Hall of Fame worthy.
Yeah.
Um, let's see. Mana.
It's great that they're making it more international. I can't tell you I'm particularly familiar with their work, but I always knew them as this legendary act. But so if we're going there, absolutely. I just the parameters are kind of interesting that it used to be a Rolling Stone centric look at things. So it's great that wall's breaking down.
Yeah, I'm a yes. I know a little bit about them, not a ton, but enough to think that they're a yes. Oasis.
No.
I'm a hard no. Okay, good. Let's not even comment further. Outcast.
Um, Absolutely. A yes, since we have, there's a precedent for rap going in. I mean, there's probably some other rap artists I might get ahead of them, but that just chronologically, not because of influence.
Yeah, hard yes for me. Hard
Yeah.
yes for me. Fish. Be conscious that our host has his finger on the turn you off button.
I have to put them in a category of they operate sort of outside that world, so they shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. But I can see it. I mean, but it's the Dead are already in, like for all the accomplishments that Fish didn't accomplish anything that the Dead didn't already do, is the way I kind of see it.
They haven't died. I mean, I will say this. this is a separate conversation I have, is an original, all four original members for that long period of time. That's an accomplishment.
Okay, I'll give you that, but you know,
I know. Moving on. Soundgarden.
I want Mudhoney in first, but Soundgarden made some great records, important band. You know, but I can't really. The answer is it's a wishy-washy yes, definitely at some point.
But they would definitely get the Innovators Award,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
fictitious Innovators Award. All right. The last one is White Stripes.
yes. I think you're going to know about it, but I mean, Jack
Hard
White
no for me.
certainly gets in there. There's it's kind of hard for me when the bar has been sort of so blurred with what's gone in already. I
I
think
know.
Jack White's an incredible innovator. I think it's at this moment, that wave that they drove, last gasp of rock and roll.
Okay. Somebody in the chat said Little Feat in all caps, and I have to agree with Little Feat.
I think so too. Yeah, there's a lot. I saw someone do Tommy James and the Shondells, and I'm Paul Revere and the Raiders. Like, you know, right on, Glenn. You're dead on it.
And by the way, for
I didn't
me,
say Tull, but I'll give him Tull. But Tull should be
yeah,
in too.
Tull should be in too. But Bad Company to me is the runaway favorite for me this year. This is the other part of our conversation. I have a sweet tooth for classic rock and big dumb rock and
Yeah.
I don't think Bad Company's big dumb rock, but they're the quintessential '70s band in my mind, and they should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
They are, right. Foreigner got in already, right? Like, to me, there's Foreigners just like because Bad Company stopped making records. you know.
That's how they got their career path. Well, I think the topic of Soundgarden kind of dovetails nicely into the story of John Rosso. Um, I'm really curious. I think I told you the other day when we were talking, I've known you so long that there's more about you that I've forgotten than than I remember. And I'm super curious about some of your early work in the music industry because you were kind of there when um, in the air quotes of indie rock and college radio, that sort of golden era of music was starting to bubble up. Soundgarden on the cover of Rolling Stone, REM breaking through. Those are just the big headlines. But all these artists that are so seminal and influential now, you were there when they were doing the work. And I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about like what was in the air for you? You're a young person, you're starting your career, you're just out of college. That's the milieu you come into. Talk about that. Like what was your perception of what was happening? Did you know it was an explosion?
No, no, actually, I was sort of hanging around for a little while before that did happen. I wanted a job in the music business. I was fortunate. My older sister was a music writer, as you know. She literally was the editor of Tiger Beat Rock magazine. So this is like late '70s, early '80s. So I had the added advantage of uh, being on the record label mailing lists, showing up at my house. So I was like, I got everything like from Sire Records was coming in order. So all of this stuff that sort of failed initial punk rock marketing of the major labels that, all those bands are legendary now, but they certainly didn't really break through with maybe the exception of like Blondie at that, like in that moment. Later we got Talking Heads and stuff like that, but as those first few records came out, nothing happened. So, I mean, I was just completely obsessed as I am now. Like, as I think we were talking the other day, I mentioned it's like I almost view every single thing with the lens of music. Like, how does this relate to music? I'm reading about this because someone mentioned this in a lyric, or this guy grew up here, or this woman, was writing about this place. So that's just always been where I've been. So ultimately, I was seeking a job in music, uh, and I ended up in Los Angeles and answered an ad in the back of Music Connection magazine for a salesperson at SST Records. And I had already, I had owned some Black Flag records, and I owned Husker Du and Minutemen records, and it was like unbelievable. I was down there, and it was ended up literally in a garage in Carson, California, at a desk with like a bunch of other smelly old punks. I guess we're young punks at the time, right? And it was really, really grassroots. And so
That's beautiful.
that's, making money selling, these records would send tens of thousands of copies, and it would make a lot of enough money to keep the lights on and put out new records. Like that was the only goal. And then um, I had just gotten there right after Husker Du had signed to Warner Brothers, and I really think that's a seminal moment of the beginning of what the year punk rock broke, '91, as Sonic Youth and the Reading Festival with Nirvana kind of points to um, the movie, the documentary too. So as those things came along, I ended up moving back to the East Coast, and because I am a New Yorker, and ended up working at Roadrunner Records. They had started a punk rock and sort of indie rock label called Imago, and and they had a punk rock label called Hawker Records. And while primarily a metal record, so I was there for a little bit while everyone sort of this signing frenzy was beginning. Like a lot of people were signing bands, and actually that's where Robert Singerman, the Fleshtones manager, was, who's on our feed today, managing the Fleshtones. The Fleshtones were signed to the label, as was Green Day, and I'm trying to think of who else was there. But so I kind of rode that out, and it just didn't really work out. And eventually, um, I found myself looking for work, and the job I got was at MCA Records as an assistant in publicity. And MCA, as was notoriously known as the um, so Bob's correcting me. I said Green Day. It was Gangrene. You're absolutely correct. Sorry about that. History rewarded Green Day much more. Apologies for that. And so I ended up in publicity at MCA Records, and it really was known as the music cemetery of America. They had Elton John, not at his finest, around this is like 90, 91, and and they also had Tom Petty, who had just put out his solo record, Full Moon Fleetwood, blew up while he had just signed a new deal at Warner Brothers. So he was actually out the door too. And interesting enough, what was going on down the hall was Uptown Records. So R&B was really blowing out big, so it was like Bobby Brown and Mary J. Blige was coming to show to see. So that was actually the exciting thing that I was seeing going on there, not the what broke through as grunge. But there was they also had done a deal with Gary Kurfürst. So the new record that I'm getting to work are, like Live, Fatima Mansions, Transvision Vamp, like these kind of more slick kind of breakthrough, indie-ish bands. But they're also distributing Geffen at what was called Uni then, and we get an advance of this record by Nirvana. And I know, I'm part of my move out west from west. I drove along and saw Mudhoney on their first US tour like 4 or 5 times. So I saw them in Denver, I saw them in Minneapolis. I was sort of working my way out. So massive, this whole Sub Pop thing was going on, and that was what I really loved. Spent all my time at Maxwell's. And then their Nirvana Smells Like Teen Spirit EP is in my collection of things to mail out to like local retailers in the tour. And I put it, I'm like, and it was, as I think everyone will attest to, that's a one spin. Oh my gosh. This is like, it was so above and beyond anything, but it was right on, like it was so, and I watched that grow. Like it went from literally like, oh my God, we might get a gold record for a really cool band, to, is it going to stop at 2 million, 3 million, 4 million? It was like unbelievable. Like, when is it going to end? And so that's where that's when there was a feeding frenzy. Steve Albini has a great piece that is, circulates about how all of that cool indie everything, whether it's humans and A&R people and bands, all got swept up into that money. And, and that was that big, we kind of all got sued up and spit out when it was over.
Yeah.
We yeah.
You
That
alluded to
over answers your
something.
question, but
No. You alluded to something though at the beginning of that, which I wanted to double click on for a second, which is in retrospect, is there a band or two, that that you could think of that are only big in retrospect, like that we think that they were massive, but it was only in hindsight and because of their staying power or the long-term impact of the music.
I mean, I don't know if anybody thinks they're thought they were big, but even like, I mean, you go to the Stooges or the New York Dolls, or I mean, I'm trying to think like the Ramones were, like they made more money on T-shirts, still today. There's so
Yeah.
many bands that I think I think what you're getting there too is the difference in consumption. Really probably YouTube the biggest driver, but certainly the fact that you have all recorded music pretty much at your fingertips with all the streaming services. History is all at once now. So
Yeah.
it's actually it's and I'll also throw in, which I think has always been the case, is my I find that sort of the tastemakers of the time that didn't necessarily were successful, like deep music fans like myself, end up so passionate about what they do. They end up in places where they get to be the future gatekeepers. So I think now it used to be everyone wanted to be an A&R, and now everyone wants to be a music supervisor. So I think over the last 20 years, the reason cool music has those bands have been elevated is all the great music that got put into TV commercials. It's
Yeah.
like I remember like the Stooges are in like a Toyota commercial. Like, can you like I
Yeah.
can't and it's and like the Ramones and beer commercial. Like it's a little obviously my old school take on that is like, oh man, sell out. But at the same time, I'm so happy to see these people paying rent and having health
I mean,
insurance
that's
and
that's the
you
whole
know,
Nick Drake
yeah,
story, right? I'm not sure we'd be
yeah,
talking about Nick Drake if it weren't for that car commercial.
absolutely. And I'm obviously a big music fan. The first I really heard Nick Drake was a Volkswagen commercial. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Like
crazy.
I
It's
heard the
really
name,
crazy.
but yeah. Because remember,
Yeah.
records used to be hard to find.
That's right. Yeah. Well, and the other piece, everything, the entire history of recorded music is available, yet there's very little context, which is sort of fascinating to me. I've talked about that probably with you, but certainly with other people, which is, having the benefit of working with younger people over the last 10, 15, 20 years, in the digital era, there's very little differentiation between like high and low or pop and underground. Like people just like music
Yeah.
and they like songs and a lot of the things that we loved and that a certain brand of music fan likes in terms of digging deep and going into the backstory and finding the family trees and all that. Not every music fan has to have that as their experience. I don't necessarily
Mhm.
like to bemoan the loss of it because it's just I don't want to be, the old man get off my lawn. Like there's one way to like music.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but it's super fascinating how when all music's available all the time, and you take away the context of scene and genre and era,
Mhm.
how what rises and what people find, it's super fascinating.
Well,
Um,
do you find yourself? I sort of admit guilty on this. Is like there's things that you didn't like at the time because of their context. Like particularly. I mean, we go back to the sort of the launch of what was called grunge and all that breaking through. There was bands that it's like, oh, it's another one of a band that sounds like this, but like in retrospect, like I think I've said this, but like at the time, Stone Temple Pilots just felt like, oh, this is the pop version of the music I like. But in retrospect, they're great songwriters writing great like Zeppelin-like riffs, and it's like you take it out of that sort of competition piece of it, and you're like, undeniable great songs, like they that sound great.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's right. I
Yeah,
think a lot of for me, I think the era that's like that is probably the late 70s, early 80s, like new wave, post-punk stuff, a lot of the early MTV hit stuff that I thought was bubblegummy, and you go back and it's like, wow, these songs and the productions really stand up. Like this is meaningful music. Yeah, so I definitely get that. I'm curious as your career evolved and you moved into the major labels and you spent time at Atlantic. Um, did well, like I'm struggling to articulate this question, but I'm curious about the differences in how major labels operated versus where you came from, right? Like versus something like SST. And I don't just mean like people sitting in a garage versus people sitting in an office in Midtown. More like attitudes towards artists, attitudes towards fans. Was there a big difference or because my a lot of my perception has been I see idealism, but I don't see changes in behavior or I don't see the idealism reflected necessarily outside of certain pockets of
yeah.
individual artists. And I'm curious what your perception of, and experience is with that.
I mean, my direct experience was the thing that shocked me most is when I went from an indie to a major, is that I actually no longer dealt with the fans. Like the
Mm,
majors deal with record stores, right? I mean, this is definitely old record business because I frankly I don't know if I have any skill that would be to a record label as a record label is defined today. Marketing in the digital world is completely different than what it was then because you're actually marketing to the people that listen to the music. In retrospect, at where I was at the majors, it was convincing certain writers, certain video programmers, certain radio programmers, and increasing your orders from the retailers. Those were that your market, your essential audience was that. So it was hundreds of people, you know, um, and that was a huge difference. I would go to I wasn't I was one I felt like I would like everyone didn't go to shows. Once I was a music fan at a major record label, and that wasn't always true of everybody I worked with. Whereas certainly, the minuscule salary, and I was there for the passion at the indie label, which might have been the way it survived, is nobody got paid anything. But the I went to shows every night, saw my fellow workers at all the shows. We supported our bands. Bands from other labels slept on our floors. Like it truly was a network of supporting that industry. I remember being at SST when the Pixies came through town, and that was like, oh, the Pixies were like they came to visit us because it was like we were part of the network. The Screaming Trees slept on my floor. It was like it was great. It was really, really great and really personal. I saw a show with Soundgarden in Long Beach, California, and there was 8 people there, and I worked with half of them. But Chris Cornell still had his shirt off by the second song, wailing away. It was pretty awesome. And the majors, it felt like there was a release schedule, and we have to get the parts out and this together, and it has to be out by mid-November so that it's in stores for Christmas. And you got to get so and so to put out we need a record. Like, I don't care if they only have 8 songs, we need to like get another 2 songs to turn this one out and get it out on like it was it and I had moved into I was at the time where even the majors were moving from privately held to corporate, where it became farther and farther
the
away. I
consolidation.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I was part of that whole thing where, I mean, I wasn't very high up. I was a product manager, and I got dragged into that whole thing where closed doors, and the head of HBO had taken over Warner, and was Doug Morris going to be out or in, and he ended up starting essentially Universal Music. I forget what the name of the company was, but he ended up taking over Polygram, and it became, and bought MCA, and all of all of that happened, and it was these big corporations and part of the consolidation of the majors. So, and that's where all the catalogs are now, that's what keeps them alive. It certainly hasn't been their progression as far as scooping up music.
It's
Do I still have a
interesting to.
job? I feel like I just like no one's going to talk to me now.
Yeah, that's okay. It's interesting because your time that was spent more on the recorded music side was really a
Rising
time of a
Tide,
lot of.
Kevin Kiernan. Thank you for pulling out. Rising Tide was the name of Doug Morris's label.
That's a blast from the past. Um,
Uh,
you were there through a lot of musical and cultural shifts, as well as business shifts. I think it's a really interesting vantage point that you have on the recorded music side of the business. But then, if I have to think about John Raso as a career for the last 15, 20 years, it's almost exclusively thinking about publishing, not entirely, but you really got to another part of the business in a very deep way. Um, I'm curious if you could, I've been doing this a long time as well. I talk to my friends and colleagues, our friends and colleagues, all ages, all career paths, and at some point, everybody scratches their head because they run into something publishing or rights related where they just say, I really don't understand how that works. And I
Yeah, no,
wonder,
it keeps me employed for sure. Publishing is really, really difficult, really separate, really it's sort of purposefully complicated from decades ago, and it's actually starting to be untangled now.
did we lose you?
I
Did
mean,
you
that
freeze?
simplification of of how rights work. I'm sorry, did I cut out?
I don't know. Yeah, there was something froze there for a minute. I don't know if it was me or you. I apologize for that.
I just got an unstable internet connection, so thank you, Spectrum.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. So and so it was um where was I going there? The concept of publishing being complicated, that over the last 10 years, it's actually really kind of streamlined the business in a lot of companies, including what I'm doing over at CSAC and the Music Services Group, is sort of bringing all the different, now that we deal with creators directly, they don't realize they're actually five different companies.
Yeah.
It's like, I made a record. Well, that makes you a record company, an artist, a songwriter, a music publisher, and probably a marketing entity, self-managed. And so it used to be you had a different person that did all those things. But so there wasn't a concept of like, oh, I just was having a conversation with someone yesterday who had opted into a licensing deal with Meta for their sound recordings and wanted to know why the music wasn't it. It's like, well, did you license the publishing to them? And it's like, no, I didn't think I did. I licensed the sound recordings, of course. And I had to explain to, no, you have to go here and opt into this license agreement to grant the publishing rights as well, because you wrote the songs. And so that's kind of where, and I don't want to jump too far ahead of where we want to go in the conversation, but that's kind of what's going now. Is you could walk into one door and you have people like me and all the people I work with who've had these varied backgrounds, from the labels to the publishing side, and go like, okay, we could do all these things if you allow us to provide these services. And it's pure back office. We stay completely out of the creative side, and it allows a creator to literally do all of these things and not have to go, okay, I need to talk to these 8 different people and make sure my data's here and that I've signed an agreement here and my royalties are getting paid here and I have bank accounts set up all over the place for where this money should be paid. So but I kind of ended up with the left-hand turn in publishing, um, because I started to see this when we initially worked together. It was the record companies it was going to be the end of record companies. The internet was going to put an end to all the record companies,
Remember
and no
that?
one was going to have to, yes, and it was all going to end, and everyone's going to have music for free by picking up the phone and dialing a 900 number. Um, but but ultimately that so it kind of like I think the people who weren't passionate about what they did and weren't like, whether it being uh, you know the internet piece of it and the marketing of that, the growing market, and the creative side sort of came together, and it eventually, as it struggled, it over the probably the next 5 or 10 years evolved into the iPod and the evolution of digital delivery, and finally to streaming that evolved. To think about how quickly that moved. um the piece that I ended up at, having sort of dropped out for a while doing pure consulting. I'd worked consulting uh, at at Bearing Point KPMG, and my first gig was with the Harry Fox agency, and then I did ASCAP, and then eventually I took a job at the Harry Fox agency, now almost 16 years ago, and I just happened to be literally at the right place at the right time. Um, Napster was trying to get licenses for all these streaming services went out and got deals to license the sound recordings. And then it's like, you can't launch, you need to get publishing licenses. And like all the companies were like, what? And through some smart thinking with people that are still at the Harry Fox agency, was like, wow, we have a database, we have a history of licenses between sound recordings in music publishing. We have a valuable asset that could bring these. This is the new record company, essentially. You're now requiring the record store to get a license for everything that they sell, which was subscription based. And through that, all of that history of data, we figured it out. Like there was, I mean, I don't want to go too deep into because it does gets really, really legal centric. There's, compulsory rates or compulsory licenses, statutory rates, what you can do. It wasn't designed for the kind of volume that you're putting up, but all of those problems got solved. And, we had relationships with the biggest streaming services. And as a result, like doing it literally every minute for day after day, we figured out how it worked. And
Yeah.
that exact model is the model that ended up being what became law and established in the Music Modernization Act, that is now the Mechanical Licensing Collective. When what they came and engaged the Harry Fox agency, and it was kind of fantastic where it's like you get to learn from your own mistakes and start all over again. So our contribution there has been been great. It's like I think it's been working out pretty well as far as it's made it simple for people to know where their publishing royalties are for all the major distribution points. So
It's interesting because you had said that it transitioned to streaming fast, and I think people who maybe were on the label side or even artists, it probably didn't feel fast, right? Like that period from say 2000 to maybe 2015 or so when streaming really started to hit scale.
yeah,
It was a dark, dark time, right? Like we have literally thousands of colleagues who I don't even know where they work now. Like they left
sure,
music and
sure.
whether it was salespeople, distribution, supply chain, like just a gutting of the business. But you're right, big picture wise, it was a very rapid
Well,
transition.
but you remember, I mean, the celestial jukebox, like it
Oh,
seems so
sure.
far-fetched, and but at the same time, it's like there's that thing being passed around for years now of Zappa talking about it, like in the late '80s. So it was a matter of bandwidth, and then there was the fight from the labels of like we're losing control. But as you see, now they're making more money than ever. They're back to multi-billion-dollar businesses. It's just that pain. But yes, there's definitely casualty of some great people but it's like it's wonderful to see record stores all over the place again. Like it went through sort of a big house cleaning and it's resettled. And I think we're getting to a pretty good place. I don't want to have the conversation really about royalty rates and stuff. That's a really different story, and
Now
I'm
you
of
make me want to have
two
that
sides. Yeah, no, I
conversation.
get it. I mean, I just I didn't want to come off as saying like, oh, it's so wonderful and it's great when there's a lot less people making the money they used to make, but there's also a lot more people who are in that never would have been in before. Like they got through the door. Their music is available.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
kind of it's an interesting trade-off of, you know, I being the kid in high school or college trying to figure out how to get a pressing plant. How much money do we have to make the record? Where are we going to get what's mastering? And going through that whole thing. And then it's like, okay, now we got a record. Now we can sell it at show. It was arguably that struggle also made the music better too, though, right? Now
Arguably.
yeah, absolutely. But the filtration process is a little less. You get it a little more raw now, and you have a little less time to sort of make mistakes, and it's much more in public. So
Yeah, yeah. I'm curious, given that, so much of the last decade, decade and a half for you has been, if not a little more, has been focused on in the publishing world, and so much of your work was supporting and working with publishers, uh,
mhm.
directly as sort of when you were running client services and even in your current role. Given all the change that's happened, um, and all the new opportunities that have been presented because companies like yours have kind of figured out the plumbing and the flow. Um, what are the pain points that you hear from publishers right now? Like, and again, I'm happy to put aside the rates point as
Yeah.
well because I don't think anybody in the music business is ever happy with what they're making, and that's fine. But what are the things they come to you and say, man, this problem just won't get better? And like, what are the intractable problems that are still left?
I mean, well, as Tom mentioned in the interview, like, I'm in the music business, but I have to say, most of my bandwidth and my team's bandwidth is cleaning up data. Like it's always been a problem, and I just think that it's we're sort of paying for that history of bad data forever. And it's slowly getting better, and it's slowly getting a lot. I mean, it's so much better than it was 10 years ago. Um, so as a result, people are like, I see Robert Sigerman's calling it as overclaims, but all of this drives from bad data, right? You have bad actors. You'll always have bad actors, right? And they purposely make overclaims. They're claiming 50% when they should only be claiming nothing, but some of that I find is ignorance too. It's like I made a recording of this song, so I should register it with the MLC or Harry Fox or whatever. It's like, no, just because you recorded the song doesn't mean you control the publishing. And they're not really, they're like, oh, I'm just getting my streaming royalties. It's like, yes, you're allowed to the recording streaming royalties. You get those through your distributor, not through the publishing entity. So there's a lot. I still think there's because you are only a computer and a credit card away from being public. There's no training and pre-education before that to know whether you're doing it wrong or right. And I
Yeah.
think that's where that's where companies like Audium and even the distributors like TuneCore has a publishing arm. Downtown Music Song Trust, they're a conglomerate there. And so as a result that they create an aggregate and some filtration of getting that a little better. But it gets sometimes the volume's so big that gets through as well. But so that I think is the challenge is you can't set it and forget it. That those days are gone. And in fact, so there was a sort of I don't want to call it a learning curve, but sort of a change in attitude from publishing used to be people came to me and got permission. And if they didn't and had success, I would find out and come after them. Right now, it's a much more proactive business than it used to be. And I mean, the old saying was like, "Oh, mailbox money," and to a certain extent, there that was great. My grandfather wrote a hit in
Yeah.
the '40s, and I'm
And my kids are
sure.
going to college for free.
Yeah, exactly. But you're, it's funny. Things like this happen all the time. It almost drives me nuts when I see a new hit song that has a famous song title, and I just know, oh, that's going to be trouble. Like I've been recently, we represent one of the older catalogs and have the old standard that All of Me. Django Reinhardt's recorded, Billie Holiday's recorded it, but there's a huge John Legend hit called All of Me, and I've been recently been cleaning that one up. So it's pretty amazing how you know machines are only as smart as you make them, and they're only has been more so only as good as the data you put into them.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. I wanted to find a way to talk about the ways technology can help in your business. And there's like obvious ways of databases and automation and things like that. But we have this world now where not a day goes by that we're not seeing some press release or news article or something really fascinating and terrifying around AI and all the things that it can do. Yet you still have All of Me showing up in your error report or whatever it is, however many times a month you have to deal with it. And it also reminds me of, I don't know if you remember this, but when you were first working at Bearing Point, I think I came by the office or something and we met for lunch and you were on site at that point at Harry
Hmm.
Fox, I think. And you showed me the index cards. And they were
Yeah.
literally 3x5 index cards
Yes.
that were typed on, and it had the
Yep.
name of the song, the name of the artist, I think the publisher, and which performing rights organization, and there
Yeah.
might have been some other data. And you were like, "Here's the database,"
Yeah.
and
Pretty much.
that
Well,
was only
that was the project I
20
was
so
working on at
years ago.
ASCAP. Yeah. Yeah. That was like I want to say just a brief history. There was a thing called the the it was like the IMJV, I think it was called, but it was supposed to be this big European joint venture to put all the databases together, which has been attempted multiple times, and at some point, it's always cost money or theory that sort of breaks it all down for the cooperation. But it was like, well, it's not being built for everybody, but we're going to need this, so let's do it. And so I ended up, being part of like sort of the requirements gathering process for membership in the database. I think it's still the same system they're pretty much using now, and it was mind blowing. But the same thing at Harry Fox. It was saying one of the things I have the typed index card for Oliver's Army by Elvis Costello. Like I was like, okay, if this is getting thrown out, I'm keeping this. So
Okay, well,
it's just
since
like
you said that, I'm going to tell you gave me one as well. I have one.
okay.
I have Nothing to Lose by Kiss.
There you go. See, so there's great stuff, but it's all at a scrap heap somewhere. Well, at this point, it's probably hopefully it's turning into trees somewhere. But uh, yeah. So we've we certainly have tried to figure out, or I should say, are trying to figure to utilize AI to figure out the classic. Okay, here's a song called "Stairway to Heaven," and it's performed by Bob, Joe, blah, blah, blah. You know, can you find somewhere out in the interwebs where you've gathered that you know it's a cover of the Neil Sedaka song or the Led Zeppelin song? You know, because we know if you say Led Zeppelin, we know which one it is. If you say, you know, Edie and Steve and Edie, we know it's probably the Neil Sedaka. You know what I mean? It's like you, or based on the year that it was. So there's, we're still, we've run a few examples, and it's not good enough yet. It's
Yeah.
you know, if anything, it's we're trying to find the level of trust where it kicks out into manual review. Because at the end of the day, it's all the time I get put examples. How did you get this wrong? When in reality, it wasn't a person that got it wrong. It just didn't kick out properly for exception handling, or that it did and it's still sitting there and it hasn't been corrected yet because it's in the like, oh, it's going to impact less than a cent world. You know, like there's you know, you just like anything else, you have to drive like what's going to be the biggest impact. And as a result, even the experiments we're doing, we have to be so cautious because
Yeah.
the database that we all use is utilized by so many places. Like when people come to the CSAC music group, this services, which includes Harry Fox and our Rumblefish service, which essentially drives a lot of blanket licensing direct agreements, and that's the database that's used. That is where if the sound recordings are matched to your composition there, that is the starting point for all of the services that you essentially get paid out of that for. So if you're everybody's out there, you're make sure your songs are straight in the MLC database, which is the compositional database that is that HFA manages, and almost every service, with the possible exception of Google in the United States, works off of. So get it straight. Deliver the sound recordings. Deliver artist name as well as ISRCs. So ISRCs are turning out to be a bit of a mess. Where we've seen scenarios where I put out a record and I assign the first ISRC and I drag it down on my Excel spreadsheet. Oh, it didn't make it one more. It's all 10 tracks have the same ISRC code. Like
Oh,
that,
and just tell
like,
people what ISRCs are.
oh yeah, sorry. I believe it's the International Sound Recording Code, and so it is the unique identifier for a sound recording. Similarly, there's something that's called an ISWC, which is the unique identifier for a composition. Those are utilized greatly in Europe. Um, uh, Been very much so more in use in the United States, but there's still a backfill issue going on there. Like it's a slower process than the streaming services really need. So uh, so those are the key things. But I'll tell you, matches aren't really strong unless you get an artist title match. Like almost everything gets kicked to exception and doesn't get automatically matched if the title doesn't match. And our algorithm does exclude things like, you know, uh, you know, let's get it on featuring, like if it's parenthetical, it gets ignored because we know those aren't but the artist name, we have variations on all these, but if it doesn't get an exact title match, it gets kicked and as a result slows the process down. So just put in every alternative title you could think of. Do not register um do not register another song for part one and part two. It's the same composition. Just add that sound recording information to the composition, so as connected information. So, and there's means of bulk spreadsheets of delivering all this information either to HFA or to the MLC. So
It sounds like a fucking
yeah,
nightmare.
it is.
Sitting here
But it
listening,
is.
it's shocking anybody gets paid.
But that's the thing. What's great is, but 85-90% of people do. So
Yeah.
it's good. I mean, you've seen, I've occasionally said to you, like I've written to you, it's like, oh my God, I just got, I straightened out like the guys from Crazy Horse. They're all going to get paid now. And I think you wrote back to me, you're doing God's work.
Well, look
it's
at
like,
look in the chat. Look at Todd Tate's comment right there. A good match is dreamy. And when I
it
read
is.
that comment, I felt it viscerally. I was like, yeah, you get that. You get the when the data all lines up, and you're like, oh, this my day is not going to be derailed by this stupid ampersand in Neil Young and Crazy Horse. I'm so
Exactly.
happy.
Well, that's it. And I try to use that as a way to, have my team feel connected to what they're doing, and that it's not just, it isn't, I do joke, it's, if we did this exact same job in finance, we'd be loaded. Instead, we're doing it because, so let's kind of like, we do, it's like, hey, let's clean up this, we really, oh, we love this artist. Let's everyone find, what's your favorite version of the song? Let's make sure we have it. Let's dig it. We do a Christmas dig every year. Like, let's find all Christmas songs that we have. Let's make sure it's all set up. So it's
Yeah, well, it's interesting because
yeah.
the other side of that, the human side of that is the stories you hear about artists that can't pay their medical bills, or the ones who have cancer and are like living in, like what's going on with David
David
Johansen. Like,
Johansen, yeah.
I mean, these are not obscure minor figures.
Yeah.
Maybe to some they are, but like these are our pioneers and our heroes. And I'm not saying it's because publishing got implemented wrong, but um, there's a human factor to all this. I guess your point is that like you're actually cleaning up data that's going to make money flow, that's going to make some material impact in somebody's life somewhere.
Well, I hope so. I mean, that's why I didn't want to just dismiss that royalty rates aren't like, you don't live off of the same things you used to. Like, yeah, I had the B side of a hit, and that put my kid through college. That, like, that there's no B sides anymore. Like,
Yeah.
there's I'm not track 11 on a big album. Those, that sort of stuff doesn't happen. So it's a different, it's sort of spreading the money very thin now. So,
We're starting to hit towards the end of our time, and I think that we may want to try to see if there's going to be some more questions for folks that we
yeah,
can
yeah,
answer.
yeah,
But I wanted to ask some questions about some of the other, you said early on, and I think you said it to me last week, like you kind of view everything through the lens of music. And I've been
yeah.
thinking about that a lot since you said it and noticing it in my life, like how everything basically like relates back to music in some way. And like, your examples about like, well, I'm reading this book because I saw an artist mention it or it was in a song lyric and I had to go Google it. And all of a sudden I'm on a
Yeah.
Wikipedia page about, the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald or something. And it's
That wouldn't
like,
happen, but okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so I totally relate to that. But I'm curious, you've played around in like music adjacent things. You had the radio show. Do you still do the radio show?
Yeah, I do it every Monday on Radio Free Brooklyn. It's at 5 o'clock Eastern time, and it's like a theme show, so it's 1 hour, and I put together a theme. I did it. I sort of cheated a little this week. I thought it was a great idea, and then it turns out it was so abundant it made it too easy. But it was song titles that are a question.
Oh,
So
amazing. What
so
are a
just to give
few?
you an idea, well, I opened with "Are You Ready" by Grand Funk Railroad, because I'm a secret fan. Are they in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? They should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. At least for the Red album, the second album. And then I also did Roberta Flack had just died. So what was the uh, um, the Holloway? I'm going to blank on the song.
Yeah, I am too.
Someone in the chat will give it. Okay.
I
But
can't
anyway,
get "Killing Me Softly" out of my head or when I think
yeah,
of Roberta Flack, and I can't get beyond that. So,
yeah. But
yeah.
yeah.
How long have you been
So
doing it?
it's so this that particular show is 7 years. I've been
Wow.
doing it every week for 7 years, and then prior to that, I did 3 years on a. It was just, I only played bands that were in town that week. So thank God I was in New York City. So this June 5th, 10 years on the year at Radio Free Brooklyn. Almost I'm 1 week shy of the entire history of the radio station. So very proud of that. It's a lot of fun. It's also buys me some credibility to get to be the DJ at any party I go to.
That's amazing. That is amazing. And you're not doing the Beatles podcast anymore?
The Beatles podcast was a fun experiment. It was called The Beatdown, and it was just a friend of mine had said, "Hey, you and my friend Chris, you guys are always good telling like the deepest, weirdest Beatles stories, and we'd every or whatever music story, but always relate back to, well, and the connection to the Beatles is X. Like, well, how'd you turn a Ramon story into a Beatles story? Well, they're named after Paul McCartney's name he used to check in hotels on, Paul Ramon, and so he's like, can you guys just do this on a podcast for me? And so it turned very similar to like almost like the way you listen to sports radio, except we were talking about music. So we did that. It was a lot of fun, but it definitely rabbit hole, really, really oddball stuff. So haven't
Yeah,
done that for about a year.
that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
What's on repeat for you right now? What are you obsessing over?
Well, I've really gone deep into to vinyl record collecting now. As I mentioned, I'm throwing my first record fair up in the Catskills Memorial Day weekend in a town called Lexington, not far from Hunter Mountain Ski Resort. And so I've been buying up lots of people's collections and stuff like that. So I'm trying to think. I've I mean, I always find myself, I keep going back to my Black Sabbath records. Like they always make me happy. So the the first two in particular, I mean, I love them all, but boy, they're just they erase a bad day in a matter of minutes. So
I'll tell you
uh
that the first Black Sabbath album, I I wish I was of a certain age when that record came out, and I could have stumbled across it in real time without any context, like walking into a record store and finding that record. It had to be mind-bending.
Well, I'm a little older, so I lived in a world where Iron Man was like staple. You heard it all the time, and so I just remember as I must have been like 11 or 12, and I had a friend. We're listening to the first Black Sabbath record, and the babysitter comes downstairs and goes, "Black Sabbath, uh-oh," and kind of left the room. Like it was
Yeah.
like this is a bad turn. So it's
It
worked out.
led to a life of yeah, I don't know, an ill-spent life in music. Um, what are you holding tickets to? Anything?
Well, I've actually I've been struggling with post COVID. I haven't been able to get my concert going mojo back. I used to go, 3 or 4 times a month. It's now it's like I will see 50 different or 100 different bands at South by. I'll I'll try to sneak in some times we have New Colossus now coming on, which is kind of the bands on their way to South by in New York the week before. So that's kind of my big thing. And then I it's pick and choose at that point. I guess most recently I went to go see this great British band called the Bug Club, um, and that was a couple months ago. They're great. They're kind of a little bit of Jonathan Richman, but they're a trio and they're amazingly talented. They go off on these jams that are surprising, and their lyrics are like really clever and but really straightforward too. I can't recommend it enough. They're pretty great. They're from Wales, I think. Um,
I think we have
yeah.
to meet up later this year for Elvis Costello because he's doing the greatest hits tour.
Yeah. I last time I saw him was with you, and I think we saw him at like Meriwether Post or something like that, and it was kind of
Wolf Trap.
disappointing.
Wolf
Wolf
Trap.
Trap. Yeah.
Remember he was pissy about something. He was like
Yeah.
angry.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it was like the When I Was Cruel tour. So I think we're gonna go to OT here.
Yeah, here we go. I saw him at the Brooklyn Bowl with the Roots, and it was good, but
I did that. Okay, that was the
didn't we
last
go
time
to
I
that
saw him.
together?
Yes, we went to. Yes, I forgot about that. That was exciting to see him. It was completely out of context, and it was like last minute. That was great. Yeah, that was great. But I saw some. I saw him. I also saw him the song when he got inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame. He came on and did Allison. I was a little disappointed he didn't go a little deeper cut, but yeah,
That's not the
you know,
crowd. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, Tom, do we need to anything from our audience here?
Yeah, there's a couple of good ones. Here's one from our pal Robert Singerman in the Q&A. He says, "What are
I
some
was
of
an
the,
intern for Robert Singerman.
you were?
Yes,
No
yes.
kidding.
When he was managing some great artists, boy, that was fun, Bob.
Well, no wonder you're in the smartest people in the room because he is the smartest guy in any room he enters. And so some
Very
of that
true.
obviously rubbed off. He asked a question down here. It says, what are some of the upcoming advances in the music business you work with that are exciting and can change the game? I'll insert my own parenthetic, not AI. And thoughts on legal lyric translations. We all know why he wants to talk about that one.
Yeah.
But seriously, do you all see anything out there not called AI that are exciting and can change the game?
I mean, I think we all have multifaceted and complex feelings about AI, and there's so many aspects of it to talk about or not. I have almost no opinion on AI as it relates to creators and creativity. I think people should use the tools that they're going to use, and I don't get a vote on that. I have a lot of opinion about sort of AI slop, but again, that's for another day as well. I talk to a lot of my clients about how they're using AI administratively and to sort of as a force multiplier in their businesses. And so I don't know if that answers the question in terms of things consumers will see, but I do think um, I'm seeing some interesting pilots of companies and organizations using AI to be either more efficient or to unlock capabilities they didn't have before and be able to move faster. That's exciting to me because I think there is a lot of inertia in our business and a lot of resource constraint organizations. And as somebody who grew up as a lover of technology, not a utopian, but certainly an optimist, I'm excited to see some positive applications of this technology because it is so complex and scary. But on the consumer side, you know, I see a lot of patterns, whether it's in or um, ticketing in particular, or the this sort of era of direct to fan. These are all things that, every 7 years or so, another crop of company comes along and doesn't really do much, raises some money, throws around the word disruption and goes away. Um, I don't have a positive answer to that question, and I feel a little delinquent in that.
I'm going to have to concur with that completely. In that it's there's a lot of technologies, that's solving a problem, that's looking for a problem to solve, rather than like it's the technology first scenario seems to be. I mean, look, I guess it's not completely dead, but at the same time, it's like blockchain was going to save our industry. Like that it, I don't think the technology is the problem. It's the knowledge. I've used the example before. It's like we've built a rocket ship, but we don't have any astronauts. So it's like there needs to be, I think, as we educate more and more people about how to deliver data properly, where it should go, and we've been sort of simplifying that process. My biggest technological challenge is wording um, application forms so people know what I mean, like without education and publishing. It's like, do we call you a publisher? Is it a catalog? Is it a, are you the administrator? Like what words do we use so you know what information to properly put in this field so we ingest it? Like that's been my biggest challenge. And I think it's the great mandate of the mechanical licensing collective, is that it has a lot of funds to go out and educate people, and that's made you know life better. The smarter people get, the more they appreciate what I do. I mean, that to be a really self-centered
That's a humble
point of
brag
it.
right there.
Yeah, but seriously, it's like it's a challenge or whatever. But it's like like a lot of people. I being in customer for service for so long, the thing I hated most is when someone came and they were mad at me, but I was taking their call, trying to help them. I did not create the rate. I did not, like, my job is to get you through the system as best as possible. I understand I'm the ear you could yell into, but like, I'm part of your team. I'm not fighting against you. And um, but I also understand the frustration. I really, really do. So unfortunately, I don't think technology there is any technology that's really going to change the game right now. And that's from an administrative point of view. Creatively, I find it evolves too quickly right now. And as a result, no one ever gets good at it and it moves on to the next process. Um, you know, you can't I was talking to Larry about this the other day. It's like the LP was invented in the 40s and we got Sergeant Pepper 22 years after that. You know, so how long, like a TikTok video is what, 5 years as the last, and it's like we keep cramming, like now you have to be great in 30 seconds and it has to be, I feel like the medium has been so impactful on the art that the art isn't able to really mature, and it becomes the delivery becomes more important than the product.
I
And I
think it's
hate that
why a
I
lot
just
of
used the
artists
word
have held
product,
on
by
to
the
the
way.
album. Yeah, no, I think
Yeah.
that's why so many people still make albums because it's a stabilizer.
Well,
It's
but
like in this ever-changing
The
world.
CD ruined the album. Like everyone had to make an 80-minute album. How many great double records are there?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
give me a great 35 minutes. You could keep your other, you know, your deluxe B-side 27 tracks. You know. I just got
And
grumpy.
get off my
Sorry.
lawn.
Yeah, exactly.
You guys sound like old boomers right now.
Yeah, we really are, Tom. We're the worst. Don't have us back, please.
I'm such a
Spare your
rockist.
audience.
Here's another question from an old pal. Tyler Sewell is asking, what do you guys think about the British government making plans to change copyright laws, which would enable AI to develop and train their models using copyrighted work without a proper license? So UK seems to be kind of going contrary, going rogue, if you will.
I mean, everything about how that question's posed, I'm opposed to. I don't know enough to really know what's going on there specifically. I know that there's a I I I I'm lucky, I guess, in that I only have to be reactive of what gets decided, but I no. I want my music to be human. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't necessarily, I don't mind. Again, the creative tools, I don't have a big opinion on. I do have a big opinion on, as you know, as self-serving as it sounds, someone who likes to think they've worked on behalf of artists their entire career. An artist should get, you have a right, you have a copyright, you have a creative right to your work. Um, I just don't think somebody else gets to come along and do whatever they want with it. Even sampling got worked out. And I get that popular music and popular culture is iterative and it always builds on what came before it. But the ability now to do it at scale, I don't think we can make the old arguments with this new technology. So I'm against it as well.
Well, I think that is a great wrap up point, gentlemen. Again, let me thank you for being the smartest people in this room today. And you are always welcome to come back anytime you want, LP and John, to host one of these and continue this conversation or start others. To the audience, thank you for your attention today. I promised you you'd be leaving here smarter and more inspired than you arrived. I think we delivered on that. And with that, gentlemen, I will say be nice to each other, have fun. John, be safe skiing, and I can't wait to see you all at a conference
You just
or
blew my cover, Tom.
y'all take
Tom,
care.
thank you. Thank you.
Thanks so
Cheers.
much. Really enjoy this. Hi,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Great seeing everybody in the chat.